So we just finished basically our second full practice of the rookie camp. We'll have a walkthrough tonight. We'll have one more practice tomorrow. And then, that'll conclude the players on the roster, free agents or draft picks will then stay and acclimate into the off-season program. We have a number of players trying out here. So basically, there's 4 groups of players. You have our draft picks, you have our free agents. There's 8 or 9 current Broncos that don't have a year credited that are able to come to this. And then the last group are the rookies or veteran tryout players. The hardest thing with this camp every year is just, it's the only time as a coach you don't really know the conditioning level of the masses. I know the Broncos that are out here have gotten 16 workouts in. But other than that, these draft picks have been visiting college or visiting teams. So that's the challenge, is just the overall conditioning level and trying to make sure that we're staying off the ground and staying healthy. So, any questions?
With Sean, is it any different setup-wise than minicamp last year? Just you have a quarterback that's going to be involved, like in terms of what you install or how you operate.
A couple things happen each off season. So let's just forget who's the quarterback. There's always a progression to the offense relative to what we've seen or what we want to implement for our team, and then. So we tweak, call it day one install is a little different than last year's day one install. And then in this camp, there'd be some things maybe we want to see that we saw from him within the framework of our playbook. But so much of it is huddle, snap count, break the huddle, shotgun, under center, just specifically, all of that is a process. So this is we said it to him at the start, all of us are behind. We're behind the team relative to where they're at, both from a conditioning standpoint, but also mentally. And we're not going to get there in a day or 2 days, but the objective is to get there soon in time for training camp. So he's handling the install well. I mean, he had a pretty good practice today, and he's grinding through it. He's doing a good job with it.
What makes a good practice? What defines that?
Well, the location of throws. He had 2 or 3 down the field throws today. It's almost like watching a good golfer. Sometimes when you watch his game over 2 years, you just there's a patience to how he plays. The ball comes out, and I don't want to use the term boring. That's not the right term, but pretty good decisions. And with each play, the efficiency and how he's operating, all of that. And look, we've done these camps for a long time, and some teams no longer have a true rookie mini camp. It might be more of an orientation. I like to have 50 guys. I like to have the workout players here because we found a tryout player every now and then. And then it also allows you to have the full team drills, and I think it develops not just the quarterback but everyone else. So oftentimes your first exposure to huddle, snap count, verbiage, that can be challenging. And but I thought he threw it well today.
Was there anything that maybe pleasantly surprised you that you didn't fully know about voters these first 2 days?
No, it's been exactly what we saw. The only thing I can think about that I was a little bit surprised is when we went to work him out privately and stood around him. He was bigger than I expected, but nothing in the last 2 days. He's doing well.
In terms of, you have a guy that hasn't taken a lot of snaps behind center coming up. How difficult is it to work the footwork and to get him to speed?
Yeah, great question. Well, look, Bill Walsh used to believe, they were an under center back then, and it 3-step, 3 and a hitch, 5-step, 5 and a hitch, 7-step and a hitch. And one of the concerns he always had with the gun was then you have to then translate that. And so if I have a 5-step drop under center, it's a 3 big and a hitch in the gun. If it's 7 under center, it's 5. So there's some of those conversions that we're working on, but all these guys in college now are in the gun, but he took snaps under center. I mean, some of them, just haven't taken snap. When they've never taken a snap under center, when at the end of the game they're killing the clock, taking a knee, and they're doing it from the gun, then they probably aren't under center at all. But so he's done that.
In terms of what you envision for him going forward and plans for him, how much does his mobility factor in what he can do when he takes off and runs?
Yeah, look, we've always valued that in the position. Players that can create. I don't think that's new. I think that's, you go back to Steve Young, and so it's our game a little bit, relative to protections and when the pocket gets a little muddy, the ability for the quarterback to move a lot, and make the right decisions. And that's the same for Zach Wilson. It's going to be the same for Jared. Those guys have good movement skills. So, it's a trait you look for.
You added some running backs to this rookie class. Do you anticipate like a full-out running back competition in training camp?
Yeah, look, anytime, all these guys, they're all competing for they're competing for roles, spots, roster, but they're 2 guys that are under contract right now that we added. I think that we never put a cap on like what they're competing for. I want to see it, and then we'll go by what we see. And that was the case with Jaleel a year ago, and he sat here as an undrafted free agent that was going through the workouts, and then pretty soon you began to see it, and then so I don't want to, who knows what we're going to get. There are 2 different players, the 2 backs that are here that are rookies, 2 different type runners, but we'll see where it goes.
What's your vision for Blake Watson then? Because only 2 backs caught 50 passes in FBS last year, Bucky Irving and Blake Watson.
I've watched him. Then I'd like to throw it to him.
You see it
No, look, we use that joker term a little bit. That was one of the traits, though, that stood out. And he was one of those guys, again, in the 7th round, 6th round. But we saw a player that was natural catching the ball. And so that was a big draw. When we read a player, that was a draw to his vision. What's the vision? And so now we're learning more about him. I'm not making the comparison, but when we drafted Kamara, we saw that vision, but we didn't realize the other things in the running game. The first handoff in the preseason, I think against the Chargers, he went 52 yards for a touchdown, and we're like, man, we can hand the ball off to him. So again, but if you ask me, the traits that attracted us to Blake were certainly that we saw in the passing game, and you saw pretty good football IQ too. So good question.
Sean, when you have a significant change like the kickoff rule, where do you start with the process of how you are tinkering with it?
Significant is a modest word for that.
Bigger than that.
Yeah, I think all of us here, you guys asking the questions, myself answering them, this is going to be we're excited about it. Every team like us right now is going through the what ifs and the landing zones, and then I think most importantly, who's doing it different than who did it a year ago, because it's a completely different play. The 2 deep backs are going to have good ball skills and, a little bit of a shortstop, third baseman, if you will, because we're not just going to get these easy to catch high kicks anymore. We're going to get these, these shots in the gaps, if you will, and if it gets through our group and into the end zone, we're on the 20-yard line. And if it goes out of bounds, obviously we're on the 40, or if it's short. So I think it creates a unique skill set for the returners. And then I do think the coverage and blocking units will get a little bit bigger because we're reducing the amount of space we're running in. And so, but from a scheme standpoint, then I think, look, it'll be. I don't know what the average touchdown. It's been a while, but you might get a couple a year. You're gonna get double-digit touchdown return. You're gonna see a lot more. You're gonna see a lot more plays, and I think that was the intention of the rule.
You mentioned Bailey making plays in traffic. It seemed like he did that out here today. Is that in the film room you see where you find that?
Well, he's 6'4", right? So there's certain type players. When we grade a 6'4" receiver versus a slot that's maybe 5'10", there's two types of grading systems that you separate two ways. You can run fast, and then the other way you can separate is you can stop fast. Both those can be effective. I do think he's 6'4", but he's low cut, so long torso, and I think that helps him in his movement skills. But there's certain players that we talk about that we know are high traffic players. Those are like forwards in basketball. They're going to be and there's certain players that are going to be speed outside. And so when we look at congested catches in traffic, yards after catch, there's certain type players that are going to play in a game, and he's that player that's proven at the college level he's comfortable, inside these numbers. Not to say he can't play outside the numbers, but I think, we like to say a good comp, but there's some traits you see from him that I think Tim Patrick has when you look at their size and where they can align. And I'm just talking about traits. So, but he's got good instincts, and he's got really, really good ball skills. I mean, he's in these two practices has moved better maybe than I even thought for a guy his height.
Sean, how beneficial is it to have someone like Troy Franklin who could generate yards after the catch the way he does?
Yeah, especially in the fourth round. He can run, and you saw that today. He's an eager learner. He's excited. Again, so he's a player that is going to play inside these numbers, but he's a player that obviously can play outside the numbers, and so different type of receiver than Bailey, and we're anxious to work with him, excited to work with him.
Coach, you mentioned the different conditioning levels out here. With that in mind, keeping guys healthy, what tempo do you like to go with this practice? Well,
there's really three tempos in our league. There's walkthrough, then there's that OTA tempo, which is always the hardest one to coach, and then full tempos. So we're in that OTA mode. We show them video before we get started because they don't know what that is even, right? So we have to show them, here are the good snaps, here are the bad snaps from years past. And then we even show them the walkthrough tempo and how that looks. Because, these guys are coming from, think about it, we got every school represented, and I don't, we can't pretend to know what their tempos were that they were used to working at. So trying to get them up to speed, and I think this group has handled it really well. The guys haven't been on the ground. They're staying up, and they're being smart. And that's hard, though. If you have me here for 3 days on a tryout, and you tell me what the tempo is, but I got 3 days, that's challenging.
What'd you like about Crum, the tackle from Wyoming?
He had traits. He was, I think, the last recruited free agent we signed. It took us probably 2 hours. We were all ready to go home. We kept turning to the scouts and street, like, where are we at with Crum? And but he had traits that we liked: toughness, intelligence. We thought he had good feet and some versatility. Those were the things that stood out.
You talk about having 3 days with these guys. What boxes do they have to check for you? What camp brings?
So, good question. All right. Number one, does the player know what to do? I mean, this is how they're being evaluated. Do they know what to do? And we know we're going to give them a lot. So, but how quickly are they learning it, and are they trying to do what they're being coached? Number three, how well are they doing it? Do they know what to do? Are they trying to do what's being coached? How well are they doing it? And then you get to athleticism, effort, and then, that's talent. So, it's for a guy who's trying out, man, it's challenging because there's essentially 1, 2, 3 practices, a couple walkthroughs, and they're just trying to make an impression. And but our jobs when they're here is to make sure that none of those players.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
I don't know.
Our job is to make sure that none of those players end up somewhere else and was like, man, they were here and now they're, so if we're going to bring them in, then we're going to evaluate every one of them closely. And there've just been so many different stories. George and I talk all the time. We've all had experiences where we signed someone from this camp, Adam Thielen. So the draft ends, not drafted. The period of signing free agents, not signed, tryout, and so you have to look at every one of those guys and try to find the good in them and what the vision would be so that you at least feel like you properly evaluated them. Yeah.
You mentioned with Vela a second ago, hey, maybe runs a little bit better than you expected.
Just his transition, yeah.
As coaches, how much of a learning curve is there this weekend of, hey, the vision for this guy might shift a little bit, or this guy does this more than...
I think, I don't, like, we have visions relative to when, we see him as a guy that can play big outside X and then come in the slot. I think I think to your question, the more specific visions evolve with the pads and the reps. I was saying this earlier, when you're a linebacker or a running back or a safety, there's a lot of alignment, assignment, breaks, but man, so many times the pads define who a player becomes. And I've just seen it happen, especially for those positions I just mentioned. And so those come when they come based on the current rules. They came earlier, but they don't come as early now, and yet, but those will happen.
Now that you've seen it in person, what kind of asset is having that Bo Nix right now?
Yeah, a lot's made of that. I get it. No one's asked me about the Ellis-Vele connection from Utah. Look, it certainly doesn't hurt. They're two young players working to improve, and then periodically on a play that they happen to. But I think, man, different system now, different routes, and I think that from being familiar with another player helps. But so much of that ends up being coincidence. Now, what wasn't a coincidence was, when we selected Bo, we had been to the pro day and went to a private workout, and at Bo's private workout, Troy was there, and a number of players, teammates, they didn't have to be, they were there. And so, you get to know these guys. The running back really made a good impression. And so after the first round, the next day we're having lunch, and Troy hadn't been drafted, and I asked Bo, how's he, how does he learn? Just one more time through, take me through it, and so. But I think that, like, if you didn't even know, you would have said, man, Vele seems to have a pretty good rapport with Bo today. In other words, I think maybe it's a little overblown.
When you have players that are back here like Art Green, Devin Key, and others, how do you evaluate them compared with everyone else when they've had that year in the system a season.
Yeah,
Plays that guy.
I think, look, for us, it's added work with them. You know, it's a win-win. You know, and I think it helps. Honestly, I always felt like, man, I'd love to see the rookies get in line behind somebody that knows what they're doing and then does it well. And so, but having some experience in this camp with players that we feel are developmental, these younger players that I think it's beneficial. It's certainly beneficial to the player here, right? I mean, I kid Beatty. I'm like, man, you didn't get accredited because I feel like he's been here 2 years, right? And I'm like, let's make sure you're not at this one next year. But that number can fluctuate. You know, some years it's 4, or and some years it's 6, and it's just extra work with it. But that's the group that I know have 16 workouts in. That's the only group that I know right where they're at as far as their conditioning level.
Coach, you mentioned Ellis. What are your initial impressions from him?
Good, really good. Look, I told you the story after the draft. You know, we had a chance to draft his brother. It's a great family. Father was a fantastic player, and you know he was a target. And again, it's hard for him to finish rushing the passer in some of these drills, but he's got good football makeup. He's tough. You know, we felt like we had to get past the Falcons. His brother's now in Atlanta. Terry Fontenot's now in Atlanta, and we sat there for that however long. And you know, fortunately, you know, we were able to draft him. So he's had a good 2 days.
Your impressions of local Division II hero John Matoka?
Yeah, I was giving him a hard time. I went into the quarterback meeting, and I was just having fun with Bo, and I said, I want to talk to the quarterback that's got 160 touchdown passes, and he rushed for 30, 190 total. So we Wikipedia'd him, and all his numbers came up, and he did it in 4 years. He's been fun to work with, and he's sharp, he's smart, got a lot of energy. We had him here for the local pro day that we were allowed to have, and it's good to have him back.
When you get a guy like Zach Wilson, you trade for him, and you get him acclimated, where do you start with him? Is it just about getting to know him as a person? Like, how do you sort of take
exactly how we started with Bo or Jared? Just come on in, let's get going. You know, meaning we start from the snap count, the cadence. You know, we want to, kind of like he'd be a rookie. You know, and certainly Stiddy's not a rookie, but when Stiddy came here from the Raiders, he began that process of getting acclimated to all the things unique to what he has to do here relative to the offense, relative to, the way this team operates. So it's kind of getting acclimated and trying to do it as quickly as possible.
I know it's early, but all the off-the-field stuff, how have you seen Bo handle the leadership of these guys and stuff that comes with being a first round?
Yeah, I mean, and you said it at the start, I know it's early. But listen, he's working like all these guys are. And throughout the evaluation process, you're trying to, not just with the quarterbacks, you're trying to find these players that are driven, and it's the hardest thing to measure all the time. How important is it to them? And so there's a lot that goes into it.
With 3 quarterbacks potentially battling to start, how difficult will it be to divide up the reps in the spring, and how do you plan to do it?
We'll figure it out. The times where we've gone with 4 is when you have a veteran maybe that, you're going to give it. But in fairness to Ben, and he and I spoke for a long time, Danucci, with young guys, the reps are important. But we'll have a rotation, and we'll go from there.